So good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Elise Boneff, and on behalf of myself and all of my colleagues at Columbia Bank, we welcome you and thank you for taking your time to be with us this morning. We hope you're staying safe and well, and our thoughts go out to all of those whose lives have been upended by these terrible wildfires. Before we get started, just a few quick housekeeping items. First of all, this event is being recorded and will be available to you after the session. You're muted, but can ask questions in the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And Steve will review the questions and respond at the end of the presentation. So 2020 has been quite a year, which I think is an understatement. It seems that never before have resilience and innovation been more important to adopt on most every level. From a business perspective, a personal perspective, a societal perspective, and most recently for us in the Northwest, simply the air we breathe. As we move forward, technology can play a critical role in helping us do so positively. We're so fortunate this morning to have with us Steve Brown, or as he fondly refers to himself, the bald futurist, to share how he sees the role technology will play in moving us forward toward greater good. I'm honored to introduce Steve this morning. So Steve Brown is a futurist, an author, strategist, advisor, and founder of Possibility and Purpose, LLC. Prior to building his own consulting business, he was Intel's chief evangelist and worked in Intel labs as a futurist. Speaking at events all over the world, Steve helps companies to make their businesses more resilient, more innovative, and more profitable. He helps leaders boost their technology acumen, create thoughtful digital strategies, and understand the profound impact technology will have on their businesses 5, 10, and 15 years from now. Steve works with Fortune 50 giants all the way to small businesses and nonprofits of all sizes, spanning every industrial sector. His main focus is on the future of work, the future of healthcare, manufacturing, agriculture, and finance. Steve was born in the United Kingdom and holds Bachelor of Science and Master of Engineering degrees in Microelectronic Systems Engineering from Manchester University. He lives right here with his wife in Portland, Oregon. So thank you so much, Steve, for being with us this morning. And with that, I'll hand it off. Take it away.
Thank you, Elise. Good morning, everybody. And thanks for joining us today. I hope this is a useful, let's hope inspiring session for you. It's been a tough time in Oregon and in the Pacific Northwest. I know I have an outrageous British accent, but this is the place I've made my home for almost a quarter of a century now. And it's been heartbreaking this week to see the smoke fill our cities, to hear calls from friends saying they're evacuating. And I hope that all of you and your loved ones are safe and well this week. And it's going to be a long cleanup. Let's help each other out through this process. And I hope that part of me sharing what I'm sharing today will help in some way, small way. So what I want to bring for you today is a conversation about our current times and to offer some thoughts sort of through the lens, through the eyes of a futurist. And to do that, I probably should explain first what a futurist is. It's one of the most common questions that comes up in Q&A, so let me head this one off right now. A futurist is not someone that makes predictions. I don't sit in a darkened room and smoke peyote and think big wild thoughts and then pronounce them. That's not the way it works. So it is a discipline. As an applied futurist, what it means is I look at trends, and that's everything from technology trends, we'll talk a lot about those today, business trends, new business models, new ways of generating revenue, but most importantly, perhaps people trends. What do people want? What are they scared of? What are their relationships like? What are their aspirations? And so on. And putting all of those together to model what will be possible, what's the possibility landscape, as I like to call it, in a certain time frame. And typically that time frame is 10 years out. I find that's the most profitable time frame. It's far enough out to be compelling, but not too far that it becomes fantasy, and not too short term that it doesn't really stretch us. So what I do for organizations and what I'm hoping to do for you today is to paint that possibility landscape so that you can ask yourselves two important questions. The first one is, what's the future that we want to build given this potential landscape? And what is the future we want to avoid? And to look at the landscape and think, okay, these are all the wonderful things we could do. What are we not going to do? And what are we going to focus our attention on? And out of that will come a digital innovation plan. And that's what I tend to help clients build. And I'm going to give you a tool at the end of this that helps you to start thinking through a framework for how you might embrace digital technology in new ways to bring innovation into your businesses. So that's a Futurist. That's what I do. What I want to talk about today is to bring you three things. So the first one is to talk about our current times, and particularly the pandemic and what that has done to our society, give you sort of three lenses of thinking about that and to find opportunity in that. You know, I want to bring you a positive message today. It's been a pretty depressing 7 or 8 months. So I want to try and bring you something positive. Second thing is to bring you a way of thinking about the COVID pandemic, which is not this monolithic event. There are three moving parts to it, and it's important to understand those three parts because you need to respond to each in a different way. And then finally, to finish up, and I'll probably spend maybe half of our time on an innovation framework that I've developed, which I hope will be useful to you. I'm happy to make this available to you all for free. You can just go on my website and grab a copy of it. And I'll walk you through some examples, some stories from a wide range of industries to give you a glimpse into the type of innovation I'm talking about that I think will be possible in the next 5 to 10 years, and to get you thinking about what you might be able to do for your businesses using these technologies. So that's the plan for this morning. Let's dive in. So first of all, I want to give you three lenses as a way to think about this time. We've had, plenty of time locked up in our homes to be able to reflect on the world, to be able to reflect on our lives. And the world that seemed so unstoppable, the modern world that just marched forward, turned out to be stoppable. And it's made us all reflect on the fragility of our society and modern life, the fragility of our own lives, and made us reflect on what's important to us. What do we really value? What are our priorities? From a business perspective as well, what are our values? What are our priorities? And what is the true purpose of our business? What are we really trying to do? And so at an individual level, at a family unit level, as a community and as a society and as businesses, we're having this time to reflect. And what we realized is we didn't have as resilient a world as we perhaps chose to believe we did. And we're all taking steps individually and as businesses to figure out how do we build more resilience into the world that we live in and into our lives. And we'll return to that thought in a moment. That's the first notion, is this has been the great reflection. The second is this time has also been the great acceleration. Excuse me. So a lot of the clients that I work with have come to me and said, hey, Steve, we're dusting off our 5-year business plan. We're going to try and do it this year in terms of digitizing, automating, and so on. So people really seeing this as a time to innovate out of necessity, to embrace digital technology, again, out of necessity, and to automate because, frankly, robots don't get sick. Robot delivery vans don't carry disease. But digital transformation because it's a way of building channels to connect with customers remotely without having to have them come into a physical property, to be able to have employees be effective when working remotely. So you've seen this acceleration, including the acceleration of things that were going to happen anyway. Automation was going to happen anyway. Digital transformation was going to happen anyway. The rise of some businesses was going to happen anyway, and that has just happened much sooner. Think Amazon now with a $3,000+ stock valuation, right? And results through the roof. That was going to happen anyway. It's just happened much faster. And then the demise of some of the brick and mortar retailers. JCPenney was probably not going to make it in the long term. They maybe had 5 years left, maybe. And they filed for Chapter 11 this year. It's accelerated a demise that was going to happen, sadly, anyway. And the gap between companies that had embraced digital technology and those that have not, who have been laggards in digital technology, that gap has always been there. What COVID did was it widened that gap. And that gap, again, was always going to widen over time. And as I walk you through some of the technologies that are coming, you will see that crystal clear. But what this is saying is it is important for every business to understand the possibilities of embracing digital technology at a faster pace and the necessity of doing so to be competitive. The third lens I would offer you for thinking about this time is, I've been calling this the great defrosting. So some organizations, in fact, some industries, have been frozen in place because of a variety of different reasons. Could be tradition. So think the educational sector, which really hasn't changed its model for a couple of hundred years. The healthcare sector is an example of being frozen in place, or at least very slow moving because of regulation. And rightly so, we regulate to keep people safe, but that has slowed down innovation. Some cultures of risk aversion in companies have kept them frozen in place. Maybe it's just inertia in the marketplace or plain old complacency. But for a variety of reasons, organizations and industries have been frozen in place. COVID is the great defroster. Because of necessity, it has forced organizations, forced industries to embrace digital technology, to embrace new ways of doing things at a much faster pace. So in education, you've seen the rise of distance learning. Now, is that the way that education will be in the future? No. That is not a great way to educate our children. And parents will tell you they don't want their kids at home all the time. But it can be an important component of an education system going forward. It makes sense for your children to have access to the very best teacher, perhaps in the Pacific Northwest, rather than the one that is just in their school. Now, of course, they want to go into school, they want to have the camaraderie, they want to have a tutor that can help them think through homework and problems, but maybe there's a hybrid model there that will be where we end up when this is all done. Similarly, healthcare, because of some relaxation of regulations around telehealth, in 2019, there were roughly 50 million telehealth visits. So that's when you use your phone to talk to a doctor. A telehealth visit, 50 million in 2019. Because of a relaxation of regulations, that's now become much more widespread. And because people don't want to go into the cofferama of a doctor's office, it's been a much more appreciated service. And we are on track, according to Forrester Research, in 2020, in the United States alone, for 1 billion telehealth visits in 2020. 1 billion. Now, when we're done with this, and COVID is a memory in our rearview mirror, to mix a couple of metaphors, it is unlikely that we will go back to doing healthcare the way we did in the past. Remote care will become the standard of care for certain types of doctor visits because it's just more efficient and more effective and cheaper to do. So when we defrost these systems, what happens is change occurs the same way that when you melt a block of ice, it starts to form into a different shape. And when you refreeze it, it freezes back into a new shape. There's opportunity here for change agents in industries and in organizations to set the tone, to set the pace, and to determine how things will freeze back into place once this major disruptive event has passed. So you put all of this together, what I see here is an incredibly painful, challenging, difficult time. But out of that comes opportunity for innovation and for change, for positive change. If you think about the way things went in World War II, which was a horrible, difficult, awful time for people on this planet, Out of that came modern air travel, antibiotics, radar, all of the rockets and the space race that gave us the GPS satellites and communication satellites that allow us to use Uber, and all of that came out of those very challenging times where we created this crucible under pressure, and all of these innovations came out of it. So this is a time of opportunity, painful as it might be. So those are your three lenses to think about this and to find something good out of a very difficult time. I want to offer another way of thinking about the pandemic, which helps us think through what should be the strategic response that we bring to this challenge. Now, we tend to think about this as this beast that has to be slain, this monolithic challenge, but actually it is a three-headed beast. There are three interconnected heads that we have to fight simultaneously. So the first head is this public health crisis. And out of that has come the need for social distancing, which led to an operational crisis. Businesses can't operate, restaurants can't open, and so on. So there's an operational crisis which is related to and caused by the public health crisis. Because of that operational crisis, we're now facing an economic crisis. So these are interrelated, but they are different crises. And the reason it's important to understand that is that each requires a different strategic response. Now, the first one around health and safety, I'm not going to dig into that in too much detail today. I am not a medical person. My wife is, but I am not. This stuff is in the news enough. We all are pretty au fait with PPE and contact tracing and vaccines and the race for a vaccine. So let's not talk too much about that today. What I do want to spend time on is these other two, which is building resilience and then investment and innovation. The best way for us to make sure that when something else happens in the future, we can continue to operate as a society and our businesses can continue to operate is to use this time as a pressure test for our businesses to understand what are the areas where we can build more resilience over time. And there's multiple layers to this. Let me walk you through each of those steps. The first thing is, as leaders of businesses, whether we are the leader on an org chart or a thought leader in that business, we have to maintain personal resilience. We need to look after ourselves. It's like put on your own oxygen mask before you can help others. And here we are in the Pacific Northwest with yet another disaster befalling us with the fires. In order to help others, we need to take care of ourselves. And that means establishing routine in your lives. And you can trick your brain into feeling less stress if you have a routine, things that you can rely on, having structure in your day. It's a well-documented psychological trick, if you like, to think through what are the things I can control and what are the things I can't, and focus only on the things you can control. And finally, just to do something for yourself every day. And for different people, it's different things. It could be that for you, it's meditation. It could be reading a book. It could be sticking on a bit of jazz music and putting your feet up. Whatever it is for you, going for a walk. Not so much in the smoke, but you get what I'm saying. So take care of yourself. Make sure you have personal resilience so you're not worrying about that. So you can show up fully in your business and help out there. And when you do that, there are 6 areas that you need to be thinking about for resilience in your businesses. This is something I've written a number of articles on in some of the national press. If you're interested in those, you can find them in my Twitter feeds and so on. Excuse me. The first one is financial resilience. So thinking through cash reserves, thinking through contracts and making sure that you can unwind them quickly when you need to, those sorts of measures to make sure that you can continue to maintain cash flow if operations are interrupted for a short time. Second one is organizational resilience. This is thinking about your people in your organization. How do you keep going? So ensuring that you have cross-training in place. So if somebody needs to step aside for a little while, someone is able to step into their role, having good succession planning, and building a culture of resilience where people naturally help each other out. That's part of the culture of your organization. Operational resilience means putting business processes in place to make sure that you have, if there are points of failure, you can easily work around them. That could be the way you design your manufacturing lines. It could be bringing in more automation. It could be embracing digital channels so that if your customers can't come into your physical premises, they can reach you digitally and have a full customer journey from discovering your brand for the first time to buying your product, getting customer service. If that can be done digitally, you have 100% digital customer journey. You're in much better shape than your competition. And similarly, digital journeys for your employees, so that as many as possible are able to work remotely if and when they need to. And that could be not just because of a pandemic, it could be because their child is sick for a few days. But thinking about building that resilience into your business. And underpinning that, all of those digital capabilities need to be properly secured and resilient in themselves. We all rely on our suppliers, so making sure you have supply chain resilience, that you have multiple suppliers if you need to. Perhaps many businesses thinking about reshoring or onshoring their supplies, so they're not having to rely on suppliers who are perhaps in China or other far-flung locations. And finally, business resilience. Do you have the ability to pivot your business if you need to? Do you have a culture in place that lets you do that? So for example, if you're a restaurant, making sure you can quickly pivot from serving people in-house to a robust, buoyant takeaway business. So thinking about, well, do I have the right products and services in place that give me that flexibility to be resilient over time? So there's some ways to think about resilience, but what I encourage you all to do is to use this time, this really difficult time, to look for those little holes in your business. So the same way, if you were building a pipeline, you put it under pressure so that you can look for it springing leaks in the pipe so you can patch them. This really stressful time is a way to find those holes in your business now, to patch them so that you are more resilient going forward and a higher functioning business going forward. Now, when it comes to an economic crisis, which we face now, the stock market's going gangbusters, the rest of the economy is not doing quite as well. And your results may vary depending on what industry you are in. Experience says that the best way, the only way to come out of an economic downturn on a growth path is to invest and innovate your way out of it. Not to save your way out of it, to invest and innovate your way out of it. And really, there are 5 main areas in a business that you can bring innovation to deliver business results. First one is you can use innovation, you can innovate your offering. You can improve your products, services, your experience, your customer experience, and create a better offering for your clients. Second way is you can build new channels or reinforce the quality of the channels that you have with your customers, whether that is an in-person channel or a digital channel or something else. The third way is to use technology to elevate your workforce. And there's a lot of conversation, there's been a lot of worry in the last, 10 years, maybe more, about automation taking our jobs, whether it's an AI or a robot. Now, some of that will happen, but for the vast majority of us, the way that technology will show up at work is it will be there as an assistant that elevates our capabilities, that lifts us up and helps us to have more meaningful, more interesting, more rewarding, and safer work. And we'll talk more about that in a little bit. So, using technology to drive innovation into the way we support our workforces. Into the fourth one here, streamlining operations. And finally, to use technology to help us create new business models and to create entirely new revenue streams. We're going to come back to those 5 ideas when we get to the innovation matrix that I'll share with you in a few minutes. So remember those 5 things. So what do we do? Well, I spent 30 years in high tech. Not all the answer comes from technology. We have a lot of work to do in many other areas too. But technology can be a significant help, I believe, to helping us make businesses, make organizations more innovative moving forward. If this gray box on the screen, it represents all of the business problems in the world, then only a small portion of them were ones that we could solve using PCs and the web, right? And we saw some of that happen through the 90s and the 2000s. In 2007, Steve Jobs stood up with his smartphone, the iPhone, and the smartphone and the cloud era both launched in that same year in 2007. Smartphones giving us a new way of interacting with consumers. This basically became the remote control for modern life. And cloud enabling businesses to stand up online services and scale them very easily. So this led to this huge boost in innovation, technology-based innovation. But it could only solve a fraction of the business problems out there because the technology just was not powerful enough. What I'm here to share with you today is that we're moving to the next era of computing, which is going to enable business owners to solve many more business problems than they could with what I would now call traditional digital technologies. And it's this era of spatial computing. If you've not heard that term before, that's okay. It's still a fairly fresh term. But what it describes is a set of technologies that enable the digital world and the physical world to be much more intimately connected. Let me show you what I mean. It's these 6 technologies: artificial intelligence, satellite and 5G networks, augmented reality, blockchains, sensors, and autonomous machines. Let me just walk you through each one very briefly. Now, artificial intelligence, we hear about it a lot in the press. What does it really mean? It is a type of computing technology which solves problems in a very different way. So traditional computers, you wrote a program, you put rules in that program, and you told the computer what to do. That's the way all computer programs before artificial intelligence worked. With AI, you train it, you show it examples, and it figures out its own rules. What this means is it enables us to solve problems that we don't know how to solve ourselves. It's kind of like a magical black box, but it is a very powerful, it's actually quite dumb, but a very powerful tool that helps us solve a new set of problems. Satellite and 5G networks, I'll talk about more in a moment, but it brings high-speed connectivity into our cities and also into rural environments. Augmented reality, for those of you who've tried virtual reality, where you strap on a headset and you're transported to a new digital world, augmented reality is a significant step beyond that. With VR, you are disconnected from the physical world around you. With augmented reality, you still can see the world around you, but digital objects and information are overlaid and placed within that world. That's much more interesting in a business context, for example, in the manufacturing line, where you need to see what's around you and maybe just have work instructions overlaid over the top. I'll give you some examples of that. Blockchain technology is a very weird, esoteric technology, but fundamentally what it does is enables you to build a trusted database of information, to store information in a trusted way. There are more things to it than that. We don't have the 10 hours that you would need for me to walk you through it all, but fundamentally it's about bringing trust to transactions and to relationships. Sensors, we are on track for there to be 100 trillion sensors in the world by 2030. That enables the digital world that we know has all this amazing capability to understand what is happening in our physical world, what the temperature is, what the air quality is, that someone just moved past this place. By having the digital world understand what's happening in our physical world, it enables us to build capabilities that make our physical world far more responsive to human needs. And finally, autonomous machines. Autonomous machines is everything from robots, cobots, which I'll explain in a minute, drones, self-driving cars, self-driving trucks, and so on. All of these technologies together are bundled into this notion of spatial computing, where computing now has a better understanding of the physical world and can therefore solve many more physically related problems and have much more natural interfaces with humans. The reason I have an artist's palette on this slide here is because I want you to think about these technologies as if they were new colors in an innovator's palette. By combining them creatively, the same way an artist combines colors, we can solve some really interesting new problems, and that's what I'm going to share with you going forward for the rest of this presentation. So I promised you I would walk you through the innovation matrix. This is a simple tool I've put together to help people think through what might be some opportunities in our business for us to be able to find new areas to innovate. So on the left-hand side, you might recognize some of the things I had on the three-headed beast slide. So the new offering, new channels, enhancing the worker experience, and so on. And on the top, you see those 6 technologies that I think, as a futurist, are the ones that are most likely to reshape every business in the 2020s. So at the intersection of each of these in this matrix, you have an opportunity, in fact, more than one opportunity, but to make this slide not so busy, I just put one in each box. There are many opportunities for driving innovation to your business. And what I want to do together is to explore how this might go in some of your businesses. I'm going to bring you examples from a wide range of industries, from agriculture, from healthcare, from manufacturing, and more. Hospitality, I think. And even if it's not one that's from your business, I want you to think about what that might be if it was applied into your industry, into your world. So use these as a way of inspiring thought and helping you to think about something new for the way that you do business. So let's dive through and just sort of explore some of these boxes one by one. And I'll tell you a little story in each one about really interesting innovations that I see happening. First one is in new customers, new markets at the intersection with satellite and 5G networks. There is a race going on to put a whole load of new communication satellites into space. We're going to have 5G in our cities, which will increase the connection capability between 10 and 100x, depending on where you're located. But if you're in rural communities, connectivity is still slow or non-existent. So these satellite companies are building networks of low Earth orbit satellites. These are satellites that work much more closely to the Earth than the traditional geostationary satellites. Because they're closer, getting a signal up to it, bouncing it through the vacuum of space, and then back down to another ground station is very, very fast. So this is very interesting if you are in banking. So Goldman Sachs, for example, they need to connect their trading desks in New York and London and have a very low latency, very quick connection between them. Because in that industry where you're doing high-speed trading automatically, literally milliseconds make a difference. So they're likely to pay for these, to access these satellites. As they pay for those, then the availability of them will be there for everybody. And we're going to be able to have, by the end of this decade, you will be able to get an internet connection everywhere on Earth. So we'll be able to connect everyone and everything everywhere. That means 4 billion people may be coming online this decade. 4 billion new minds, 4 billion new people with needs for internet-based services. How are we going to serve them? What are we going to do for them? So you see the companies listed on the left there. SpaceX is Elon Musk. Blue Origin is Jeff Bezos. So it's kind of the race of the billionaires. But this is going to happen. And we're going to see more satellites go into space in the next 5 years than we have had of all of human history previously combined. This is a big deal, and it's not been very, very well talked about. So I wanted to bring it up today. Huge opportunity. Next, let's look at the Internet of Things, sensors, and new business models. And to do that, I'm going to talk about a smart connected toothbrush. Now, you may think that's a very stupid idea, Steve. Why would I want a connected toothbrush? Well, it's interesting because this smart connected toothbrush connects to your smartphone, gives you feedback on your brushing habits. Yeah, still not that interesting. What's important here is that this is a toothbrush that can tell if you're brushing for 2 minutes, morning and night, you're getting back into your molars, doing it right. And it tells on you. It tells on you to your dentist. You think, well, why would I want that? That doesn't sound like a good idea. The reason is that this dentist who invented the smart connected toothbrush, because he knows that you have good oral hygiene, you are at lower risk of needing expensive interventions. What that means is he's able to offer dental insurance for 15 to 20% less than the competition. Now it's interesting. That's a whole new business model because what he's doing is bundling a smart toothbrush. Actually, he's bundling all of the toothpaste and floss that you can use. And what he's now selling is all hygiene. He's not selling a toothpaste or medical services. So it's a completely new way of thinking about it based on this Internet of Things, sensor-based, smart connected toothbrush. Give you another example. This time, a smart product that uses artificial intelligence. This is from the medical world. I'm going to give you a couple of examples here. These are both Israeli companies, Sanala and Vocalis Health. Sanala makes that stethoscope you see there. It is an AI-enhanced smart stethoscope. So at the moment, a doctor puts on a stethoscope, listens to your chest, listens to areas of your chest cavity, and tries to hear some malady that you might have. This uses AI and lots of training that it's had to be able to hear those melodies. And more important here is that not only can this AI hear at the frequencies that a human can hear, it can hear other frequencies of sounds going on in your body. They're called infrasounds. These are things that a human doctor can't hear, but an AI can. And this AI is able to make diagnoses and make recommendations to the doctor based on what it can hear. Now, this company also produces, on the top right there, you see it, that's a home-based device that someone can use at home to monitor health conditions. And this company is already working on a COVID-19 diagnostic. So being able to just put this on the chest and automatically trigger and say, yep, this patient has COVID. So maybe not needing to have that thing stuck up your nose to find out if you have COVID or not, and then have a long wait. This is almost instantaneous diagnosis. Now, the reason I have a microphone on this screen here is that Vocalis Health, the other company, they are just using an AI to analyze people's voices to listen for what they call vocal biomarkers that indicate disease states. So they have been working with the Mayo Clinic, and they've already successfully shown that just by listening to your voice, they can hear COPD, sleep apnea, chronic heart failure, and coronary artery disease, just from the sound of your voice. They too are working on a diagnostic so they can hear COVID in the sound of your voice. And longer term, they're optimistic they'll be able to hear hypertension, diabetes, and even cancer in the sound of your voice. Completely changing the way we think about delivering medicine and complementing the amazing skills of our clinicians. So I wanted to bring you this story because this is a real big idea breakthrough. What it says is that AI can help us humans to see the world in completely new ways. It gives us a new lens on the world. To be thinking about, are there ways that in your business you could use AI to do just that? All right, pick another one. Supply chain transparency. It sounds like a bit of a yawn, but let's check it out. So supply chains just sound dull, don't they? But that's how we get all the stuff that we enjoy in our lives. And we rely on these supply chains to bring us the food that we eat and to bring us all of those things that we buy on Amazon when we've had a few too many drinks late at night. So let's talk about supply chains and how they work today and how they might work better tomorrow. So at the moment, consumers, brands, and suppliers kind of have a different set of priorities. Consumers want products that are at a good price and they want them to be safe and good quality. And they rely on brands to make claims and put things on labels that are regulated. And then they make the best purchases that they can. Brands typically don't make the products that they sell us. They have them made by manufacturers, suppliers, and they set a set of requirements for those suppliers, and those suppliers may or may not meet those requirements, but they certainly claim that they do. So there's some trust going on here, and often that trust is broken, right? We've had recalls of romaine lettuce, I don't know how many times. We find that Pepsi was selling stuff that said it was GMO-free but wasn't, and there's stuff going on here, and we can't always trust what we buy. And more importantly, perhaps, consumers do not have visibility to help them make an informed decision. We don't know how much energy was used to make a product. We don't know how much poisonous gas was released to make a product. We don't know for sure that a product wasn't made using child labor or slave labor. How do we fix that? Well, there are some big efforts going on, including in a startup that I'm associated with, full disclosure, that is looking to align all of these interests together by making it possible to gather data on the origin of products, where they came from, who made them, how were they made, how were they transported, and to document all that as evidence using the trusted capabilities of blockchain so that consumers can be given proof and told a true story about how a product was made, how it came to them in their door, so that they can make an informed purchase. If we can align all of those, I think it's a great mechanism that may give us the tools to be able to address things like pollution, child and slave labor, climate change, so that if we know how much greenhouse gas was involved in making this product versus this product, maybe we can make a more informed decision if we care about those issues. So that's supply chain transparency. Let's talk about robots, because we're talking about the future. We've got to talk about robots. Let's talk about one in agriculture. This is from a Swiss company called Robotics. It is a solar powered, so on the top there, the top flat surface of that, it's a big solar panel. It's a solar paneled robot that roams through your fields and zaps weeds. Now, typically a farmer might use herbicide and spray the field with that herbicide to kill off the weeds. What this robot does is it roams through the field. It has a camera, so it uses artificial intelligence to spot the difference between the crop and a weed. And it can either zap the weed with a mechanical spinning head, or it can just squirt it with a little squirt of herbicide. Using this approach, the farmer is able to use 90% less herbicide. So that's a lot less herbicide that's leaching into the groundwater, and it's a lot less herbicide that the farmer has to buy. Now, the average farm, I'm hearing it's like $100,000 to $150,000 a year less in herbicide. So great for everybody, really, perhaps except Dow Chemical. But thinking about how robots can change the way that we do business by doing these sort of obscure roles and things that perhaps humans would never do can change business models. Give you another example of a robot, perhaps not a robot you would think of in this form. We need to store energy. We have lots of hydroelectric energy here. Sometimes there's people up and using it. Sometimes we're asleep and using very little. It'd be nice to be able to store some of that here in the Northwest. One of the ways that is envisioned to do that is from a company called Energy Vault. They have already built a prototype of one of these giant robots, like a skyscraper. And when there is energy to store, it lifts up these gigantic concrete blocks and stacks them up around it like a skyscraper. And then when it needs to release energy, it picks up those blocks and drops them and uses turbines in the cranes that you see there to generate energy and push it back into the network. Really innovative, interesting way of storing energy as kinetic energy using concrete blocks and a gigantic robot. Cool stuff. Let's talk about the future of work and augmented reality and its role in that. I'm going to speed up a bit because I know we're running a little late on time here. So augmented reality, as I mentioned before, enables you to see the physical world but have digital objects overlaid on top of it. This gives us the ability to be able to train workers in near real time, to show them what to do in the moment, to give them instructions, show them what tools to use, give them build instructions so that they can be productive on the manufacturing line day one. That's a huge breakthrough. And to maybe for a maintenance worker to be able to go out and work on a self-driving car that's broken down and one they've never seen before and automatically be shown how to do it so they can be productive in that moment. You're also seeing augmented reality being used by first responders. You put augmented reality onto a drone as you fly it over a disaster area, and you can start to add in additional information that helps the people making the decisions about how to marshal resources on the ground to be able to do so much more intelligently. You see them used at fire scenes and floods and so on, and EdgyBees is a company that's doing that. They have a great website if you're interested in the kind of stuff that they can do. And finally, in surgeries, I have a number of friends who are surgeons. They tell me, when you go to do a surgery, there's always imaging that you've taken of the patient so you can see inside them, but the patient's laid in front of you and the imaging is off and up to the side. And so you're looking at the patient, and you look at the imaging, you look at the patient, you look at the imaging, and you try and put it together in your mind and find the right place to make the incision and hope for the best. What augmented reality is being used for is to essentially give the surgeon X-ray vision so they can see through the patient by overlaying that digital imaging on top of the patient in just the right spot so that they can align those and see what they're doing. It's pretty amazing technology. As well as augmenting our vision and giving us guidance and superpowers in that regard, we're also seeing AI be used to augment our skills and to elevate our skills. Let me give you a couple of examples. Autodesk have big offices here in town in Portland. They are using a technique called generative design to partner with a designer to create these amazing looking sort of organic designs. So what happens is the designer designs something, and then the AI takes that initial design and riffs on it. And it comes up with 100, maybe 1,000 or thousands of alternatives of different ways to realize that design, and shows which ones might be physically stronger, which ones might be cheaper to make, and so on. You see some examples here of generative architecture, generative design of motorbike parts. That's in the top right there. The furniture was designed with generative design, and that's an Under Armour shoe that's designed to be highly shock absorbent, using this very organic looking sole. So what's this doing? It is enhancing the creativity and imagination of designers. And designers that use this technology absolutely love it. It doesn't just make them more productive, it enables them to be more creative. AI is also being used in the real estate sector. First has created an AI for real estate agents that helps them to predict when previous customers are likely in the market to move and buy a new home. So they can time their outreach for when they call them. And it is surprisingly accurate. Skyline has developed an AI. They're a commercial investment company. They use an AI to help them predict which buildings are going to have the best value over time, which ones have rents that are under what the market can bear, and that helps them to make their investment decisions. In both these cases, the AIs are enhancing the human's intuition and enhancing the decision-making abilities. So AI is going to show up in our lives and help us to enhance a number of our skills and make us much more capable. One more example to finish off, which is Cobots. These are robots that are designed to work in partnership with humans. And I've got a couple of examples for you. First is a Seattle-based company called Drone Seed. Now, replanting forests in the Pacific Northwest is going to be a thing in the next few years. And this is a really interesting way of doing that. They pair humans with a swarm of drones that the humans controlling. And those drones, they're essentially like flying paintball guns. They can shoot seeds with a bit of nutrients for the trees that you want at the soil and plant those over a wide area. These drones working in partnership with a human allow them to cover 80 times the area that they could alone. Final example is from a cafe in Japan. These are little cute robots that serve coffee. Yeah, big deal, you say. These are actually robot avatars. They're not controlled by an AI. They're controlled remotely by human beings. These humans are at home, and these are people with severe disabilities who cannot move, other than perhaps to move their lips and speak, maybe move their eyes. And it enables them to be productive in the workforce, to be able to interact with customers, to be able to have a human connection between the robot and customers. Customers love it, and the people who work in this cafe love it. It gives them a sense of worth. It helps them connect to other human beings. It helps them to have a sense of dignity. So there's all kinds of ways that robots can be used to solve some really big, interesting human problems. So if this matrix was useful to you, if the discussion of these technologies was useful to you, this is the selfless plug here, shameless. I wrote this book, Innovation Ultimatum. I gave you a few stories from the book in this presentation this morning. There's probably another 200 or 300 in the book. You can get it at PALS and get it online. And if you like that matrix, if you found that useful as a thought process, you can go to my website, you sign up, you join for occasional blogs on the future, and you can download that as a PDF for free. I hope that would be useful to you to help you think through. There's also another one I have which looks at how you combine those technologies to do really interesting things. Final thoughts, and then we'll take some questions quick. My advice for you all, I get asked all the time, what do you advise we do, Steve? You're the futurist. First one is take the time to boost your technology acumen. Technology can seem scary unless you know a little bit about it. And I don't mean understand the bits and bytes of how AI or blockchain works. You don't need to know that. What you do need to know is how can these technologies be applied to solve real world business problems. So I encourage you all to invest the time to do that. My book can be a help in that. There are plenty of other resources as well. Second is to figure out, if you haven't already, how can you create 100% digital customer journeys and digital employee journeys so that people can work remotely and that customers can interact with you remotely. Have the tough question, are we a remote first or an office first business? People ask me, is the office going away, Steve? I think the answer is no. People will always need to come together, but the default may flip. So instead of the default being that you go to the office 5 days a week and you stay home by exception, maybe now you stay home by exception and go into the office. You stay home by default and you go into the office by exception when you need to collaborate with others, when you need to build your relationships, when you need to take advantage of the serendipity of running into someone in the cafe and so on. So things may just flip. Take time to define your new norm. We're not going back to January 2020 when this is all done. What will that new norm look like for you, for your customers, for your suppliers, for your partners, and so on? And once you figure that out, then build your innovation strategy to innovate forwards. And I hope that at least some of the ideas I've offered today are helpful in that regard and have inspired you to at least think about something different. If I can be helpful to any of you, these are my contact details. You're welcome to go to my website, check things out, follow me on social media. I try and post inspiring stories of how people are innovating in the future, and you're welcome to reach out to me on email as well. So thanks for your attention. Elise, back over to you.
Great. So it looks like people have been using chat, Steve, to ask some questions. So we're getting some positive feedback. So lots of thank yous. But also, let's see, the first question that came in was towards the beginning of your talk, and it says, can you please repeat the 5? And I think there was a slide where you had five things. Does that sound familiar? I wasn't.
Oh, well, yeah, there were 6 things and 5 things. So let's go back to they're on the matrix. So let me if I can figure out how to do this quickly. Screen sharing has stopped. I can fix this. Hang on. Technology. You'd think a futurist would know how to do this, wouldn't you? Here we go. And sharing again. All right. So there's your 5 on the right. These are the 5 areas that I outlined on the matrix. Innovating your offering, your channels, elevating your workforce, streamlining operations, and then developing new business models and revenue streams. And then there were the other things, which were the resilience things. So I'll leave those up on the screen for people if they want to take notes.
Great. And then the next question that came in is, how might any of this help address systemic racism and health disparities?
Whew, that's no small question. Yeah.
That's a thesis in and of itself.
Yeah, I mean, that's a massive question. And it's not one I haven't been thinking about. I'm not sure that technology particularly helps us to address systemic racism, other than perhaps giving us an ability to watch what's going on more closely, to be able to use AI perhaps in real time to monitor police cams, both to keep the police safe and also to keep the citizenry safe. That would be one area that we might be able to deploy technology. I think it's more interesting in the health disparities thing, by democratizing healthcare, making it less expensive, and flipping the model. Today, the model is, I'm sick, I go into a physical premise and I'm charged ridiculous amounts to get access to someone who paid ridiculous amounts to get qualified as a healthcare professional. So one, we need to figure out ways to make the cost of becoming a clinician lower, so they're not carrying enormous amounts of debt. So we need to figure out how to make education more cost effective across the board. And then we need to make it easier so that people can manage their own health in their home. And I think you're going to see the rise. I showed you that one device that's used to listen to sounds in the body to diagnose conditions. People with chronic conditions can have those in their homes to monitor those conditions. And that information is securely shared with a clinician, and they don't have to keep going in for doctor visits. That device was $99. So I think being able to use these technologies to shift healthcare to the home, to overall reduce the cost of access to healthcare, and also to, this is where race really does come in, other than in the socioeconomic divides that we have. Most drugs are developed with the target market of Caucasians. That's the way that it has worked because of the way that drug tests are done and the targeting of the population. And that's why you're seeing drugs being developed now in partnership with AIs to look at the population. And instead of targeting the drug broadly, which means targeting Caucasians a lot of times, to start to target drugs at particular genetic groups. And that's something that's being embraced in the Chinese market because they want drugs that are broadly have more efficacy with the Chinese market. India is doing the same thing for the Indian population. And I think being able to start to target drugs and personalize them will help us to have more efficacy for different ethnic groups. So there's just a couple of thoughts off the top of my head. It's a huge topic.
Yeah. Well, and we got a comment in from a panelist, or not a panelist, from someone attending, and it just a comment, and maybe something for you, Steve, to keep in mind, is that there has been some AI in regards to passing sentences. So I believe our judicial system that apparently can sentence people more fairly. So
Yeah.
I believe we may have a lot of lawyers and perhaps judges on the call, and so that might be something to explore as well.
Yeah, that's something I talk about in my book, particularly focused on the New Jersey system. They got rid of the bail bondsman and figured out a fair way for AI to assess a case, and they stripped out all identifiers of gender or race, even someone's address, which can be a proxy for race, and were able to bring a much fairer system so they could keep people out of jail and only put the people in there who really needed to be. So yeah, there's a lot we can do but we also have to be careful that when we bring AIs in, when you train them, they tend to pick up human biases. So you have to be very careful to strip those away. So when you build an AI, it's not reflective of the way humans used to behave. It is reflective of the way we would choose and want to and aspire to behave.
Great. Well, thank you so much. I think that's all of the, well, here we have a question coming in. So this says, do you have any advice for those of us whose industry has traditionally been wedded to in-person experiences, live theater? So I think this might be a theater or maybe a movie theater or an actors. How do we adapt and grow in this changing world without turning into film or television, which are firmly entrenched? Okay, so this is live performances.
Yeah, and I feel your pain, Susan. I see the questions from Susan. I feel your pain because I am a live performer myself. That's where I shine, is when I'm on a stage in front of 500 or 5,000 people. And I think I don't know that digital technology will replace that. It should not replace that. Humans like to gather together. We are tribal. It is part of our culture. We value being together in a space. And I think that will come back. As soon as we are able to, people will flood back to theaters, to movie theaters, to restaurants, to bars. We don't do that because there's a show on stage, because I can watch that on my TV. We don't go to a bar to have a drink because it's of the alcohol. We have that in our closets, right? We go there for social connection and to be in a space with other people. So I think we can do things in the short term to still try and entertain people digitally, but this is going to be a process of waiting this time out and waiting for the flood to come back. And I believe in my deepest soul that this will come back, and it will come back big because people crave that type of experience.
Great, thank you. All right, well, we're 1 minute over, so I just want to once again thank you all for joining us this morning on behalf of myself and Columbia Bank and Steve as well. So Columbia Bank is trying to adapt to these times, and we've developed a series of virtual events. This is actually the second in a series that we'll be doing throughout the end of the year. So keep your eye out for additional invitations coming from us. Our next event is September 30th. It's going to have an economic focus. We are super fortunate to have, and I hope I don't slaughter his name, John Tapagna with Eco Northwest, who will be speaking on talking about the economy and how that is being shaped by what we're currently going through in the Northwest. And then following that, we have our annual nonprofit symposium on October 15th. It's featuring Carrie Dunn, and it is going to be focusing on the relationship between nonprofits and funders, whether foundations, corporate, whatever, individuals, and creating equity and the responsibility between those two parties, funding nonprofits and the services that nonprofits provide. So thank you all again for attending, and we will get the presentation out to everybody who RSVP'd, probably within the next week or so. So thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
So much.